Okay, so continuing on with our air conditioning install of our GTA replica, this is the original setup we were going to use on this car. It is a traditional style GTA, albeit modern GTA setup, which would have a separate oil cooler from the radiator. There's a couple things that kind of become an issue with a setup like this, okay, and I'll show you what they are in a minute. One, this is a build off the original layout, okay? And just like in air conditioning in a home or a building, there's a thing called load calculations on the cooling capacity of a car. Obviously, as the horsepower and the overall volume of the motor goes up, the radiator needs to go up as well, because there's a point in time where the car's need for cooling capacity is going to exceed the radiator's capabilities of removing heat from the fluid that's in it, okay? Obviously, if we're putting a 2-liter motor in a car that was originally set up for a 1600, we have to be cautious of whether the radiator has the cooling capacity for that. When the horsepower of that motor goes up, the cooling capacity becomes affected. Now, this system right here works very well, but this is also something that's probably set to a various limit of what it can actually cool down. Now, the original GTAs were, let's just say, roughly 170, 180 horsepower, which is substantial on 1600, so the cooling capacity needed to improve in order for it to work. Now, that also is influenced on where it's at in the world. For example, the cooling capacity is different here in the northwest of the United States than it is in the southwest United States. Summertime down in the southwest United States can consistently stay at 100 degrees or more. You have a car that has a motor that is substantially larger and far more powerful than a GTA was. Now we're looking at something that's going to be in the area, let's just call it 230 horsepower. That's easily 50, 60 horsepower greater than what this particular system was set up to be able to handle. Plus, we're also putting air conditioning in. Setting this aside for a minute, there is literally, this is the front, this is what we look at through the grill. There's literally no place for this to fit in this current configuration. Not to mention, already concerned that this may not be able to keep up with the cooling capacity that we will need, because we have two things that are outside the original design of the GTA radiator. One, we're also focusing on operating in southwest United States, where it stays hot all the time, it seems like to me. Which it may affect that cooling capacity. Plus, we have a motor that not only in volume but in horsepower is much greater than what that was originally designed to use on. And then on top of that, we're putting air conditioning in it. This is a condenser. This is how it removes heat from the refrigerant. This has to sit in front of the radiator. This will constantly have an operating temperature when in use well over 100 degrees. So the radiator is going to get saturated with that additional heat plus this. Right about you now, you can see that this is probably not going to work on a GTA style radiator. So we had to go to plan B. This is the in-house designed radiator. Now, this is not by any means meant to be used as an improved design on that really nice GTA setup that we just had. This is just a different version. And the reason we have these made this way is because we have two things going on here. You can see this right here. That's because we have the setup for an incorporated oil cooler. It's in the system with the radiator. So basically, as the fluid heats up in this, it heats up the oil, thus meaning that both of them stay at an equal temperature throughout the overall operation time. Secondly, this splitting here is because we've slowed down the fluid going through this. The slower we can make this go through here, but with efficiency, the greater cooling capacity we have. In other words, it comes in, stays in this bank, comes all the way across here, then it drops down, comes all the way across again. So we're effectively doubling the capacity of this. Not to mention, there's substantial more rows of cooling capacity in here. We know that this radiator is going to work well whether it's in the middle of Southeast Asia, where some of these have ended up, Australia, where some of these have ended up, or you know, the hottest parts of the United States. So this tends to work. On a race car, we don't even run a fan because this thing works so well that, you know, the fan never comes on. So it effectively, you know, if you're only in idle time basically in the paddock, it was pointless to have fans at all. But this being a street car, now we have where this mounts. Okay, so it would go literally this way. So now the grill would be right here. But with that said, now that we have a different kind of cooling capacity, we now have the ability to mount this as well, like that. So now what we will have is twin 10-inch fans right here that'll be cooling off the condenser as well as the radiator. This just makes good sense for this particular application. This isn't saying that the GTA setup doesn't work, because it does work, not to mention it's a really good looking piece of equipment. It's just that because we are adding so much load to the cooling capacity needs of this particular motor, we had to go back and approach this with a different radiator. It's a little bit on the forward thinking side, but it was rather obvious need, because obviously I need to start focusing on putting the condenser in, which is what this is, and I knew that there's no way I could mount it to the GTA radiator. So yeah, that's an additional expense that we couldn't have foreseen coming, but that's all right. We'll be easily able to sell that to someone else. For that matter, it might end up in my car. I like them.
What you're looking at is a clear polycarbonate plastic that's been sanded, so the plastic resin we're about to mix bonds to it very well. Once that plastic resin is dried, it'll take a couple days, and then we'll sand the entire surface. This completed task will make the center console immensely rigid and allow the wood to stay firmly in place without cracking or shrinking.
All right, so okay, so all right, so on our air conditioning modified car, what we're doing is we're taking the 74 type interior and we're modifying it to meet our needs. One of the things that we're doing is instead of running just the regular veneer that you would have on a console, we're going to run actually a 1/4 inch thick high quality mahogany, and it's going to fully wrap the entire dash. We're not going to have any trim around it. It's just going to be suede cover and, you know, a really nice wood dash. And the only things that are going to be exposed is a small entry, because we have a remote shifter. We don't need the gigantic shift boot area. So we have a small entry here with a leather boot extending out for the remote shifter. And the air conditioning controls will be right here, and then we're just going to put our own aviation style switches for all the accessories right here. So effectively the dash is going to be very clean and tidy, and the center console will be the same way. It'll be just a minimal type of things that are there to, you know, for serve function, and that's it. So we have a person who specializes in violin restoration is going to take on the wood project. But one of the things, the reason we filled this in so tightly with this this product is because we need the center console to be just like the dash, be immensely rigid, because once the wood is in, wood tends to absorb pressure from plastic as it expands and contracts, so we don't want the wood to stretch and inevitably crack. So we're making this as rigid as possible as to reduce the amount of movement it will have in its life. So the thing's stripped down now. This is the old material, which we're not going to use anymore, obviously. And when it comes back, next time you see this, it'll have the very trick air conditioning controls, the aviation style switches, a small leather shift boot for the remote shifter, and that's about it, and a very nice wood finish. All right, the other thing that's going in this car, because we are getting so advanced on this car, is we are changing from a fuse block type setup to an all-in-one wiring harness with an ECU. Your flasher relays, your headlight relays, your horn relays, everything is in this. This cleans up the wiring of the car substantially. And if we run out of fuse connections, I should say, for this, we can always expand the module. These things are fairly cheap. You can buy these online for less than 200 bucks, and this is just a good way of getting rid of your old wiring harness. Another reason you might want to think about changing something like this, unless you're keeping your car original, is that Anytime there's not a full contact on a fuse across a terminal, that is a voltage drop. When voltage drops, the amperage increases, and that's when you get wiring that starts to burn. That's when you have lights that don't illuminate as highly as they should. So there's just an inherited problem. So even if you're going to keep your car original, you should probably pull your fuses, clean the surfaces of the contacts, bend the tabs back down so the fuse stays in there very tightly. If they move around fairly easily, that is a voltage drop right there, and you don't want that. You're going to start burning wire. The higher the amperage the thing is, in other words, if the fuse is securing the light, that's a high amperage use. That's an easy wire to burn. So you want to make sure all your fuses are good and clean. And last but not least, now we can finish this AC. Because our grossly overpriced line crimping tool showed up from Snap-on. It's a shame that we had to buy something so expensive in order to finish the air conditioning on this car, but effectively it is what it is. And seeing how we now have a couple other people who want us to do air conditioning in the car, it might justify the means. So if you were thinking about tackling the air conditioning process on your car, this will probably stop you from doing it. A tool like this is going to set you back about 350 bucks. If you're only going to use it one time, it's kind of silly to do. But effectively, if you're looking at the air conditioning side of this project, just for the idea of being able to do it in your car, you can always let a professional do it and let them absorb the cost of this thing. And that's it for that.